For staying with us, if you're just joining us, this is Firecrackers. You've missed quite a lot, but don't worry, you can catch up with us on our Facebook page. We stream live on Facebook, and after the program, you can catch up with clips that will be uploaded on our YouTube channel. And now we want to talk about the prevalence of drug use among youth in Nigeria, especially with NDLEA coming up with this initiative of testing co-members for drug use before the NYC program, so before they are admitted to camp. And now with me here in the studio, Afam Umeano is the African Regional Director of MITES, that's the Mass Initiative for Non-Illicit Drug Society. Good evening and thank you so much for joining us at this time.
Thank you so much.
Okay, all right, so now to the topic that we have at hand. How did you see this new NDLEA initiative of testing youth coppers, the ones going into camp for drug use before they are admitted to the camp? How do you see that development?
First, for starters, we have a very serious drug problem in Nigeria. And Nigeria is actually one of the countries that is rapidly growing to the point of epidemic when it comes to drug abuse and drug economies, as it were. So whatever effort being made would be welcome to at least address this issue, or at least seem to address the issue. Because as we speak, if you know what's going on in places that nobody's paying attention, you'll be so shocked. Take, for instance, the IDP camp. And if you think it is the males that are supposed to be culpable, it's predominantly women. And women are not just boys and girls, or girls as it were. Women that are married with children that are aged, even some that are old enough to be grandmothers. So drug abuse has become something that Nigeria needs to sit up and take action. So this initiative, this policy, is all well directed anyways. But again, policy is not our problem. We have policies, but implementation. And implementation is not just the issue. We get started, but we don't continue. Now, if we continue, it depends on the whims and caprices of who is in power. So it's not the initiator that is dealing the problem. Somebody might initiate a good policy, but as soon as he leaves office and he's not in power anymore, his successor turns out to probably reprioritize what works. And that will determine how far that policy would go. Now, when you look at it on its face value, the policy of testing coppers, first of all, you need to ask yourself this question. Has the NDLEA done its real homework in that regard? Because quite frankly, the population of people that use drugs in the university don't usually graduate. So how many of them actually come to the point of going to youth service? That's one. Then two, what classification of drugs are we even talking about? Then number three, what effort will be done when you actually find someone? Are you going to say, don't graduate, don't come to youth service? Are you going to send them back? Or are you going to apply the RRR, rehabilitation, revamping the person, reintegrating the person? Because these are the processes that you must go through to make good use of the effort you've made, the budget that you have expended by doing all of these. So these are important things that we need to look at. And then again, our peculiar environment, our society. You see, we have good policies, like I said, but sometimes too, our environment does not allow certain things to really, really work. But for whatever it is worth, I think it's something that needs to be done, can be done.
Okay, all right. So if we were to look at drug use in Nigeria, how worried should we be about the prevalence of drug use among, well, I think it's not just even youth now. Let's just say among Nigerians as a whole. How worried should we be about the use of drug among the citizens of Nigeria?
I will answer that question by telling you something. Do you know that between Ebola and drug problem, that drug is worse a problem? Between cancer and drug, which one do you think is worse?
I say cancer.
No. Cancer could kill a handful of people in a whole year, but drug will erode a whole generation if you're not careful. Do you know how many people that go under? Do you know how many people that will never recover from mental problems that the drug has put them into? And there are some kind of drugs, especially the synthetic drugs, the psychedelic drugs. Those ones, some of them, the victim gets addicted on first attempt. And getting them out of it is something entirely different. Some don't come back to the same person they ought to be. And then that's not to mention the loss to the family, the loss to the community, the loss to the nation, and the loss to the person as an individual. So, our case is even worse in Nigeria because if you check the United Nations reports, there are countries that are having growth in drug abuse, substance abuse issues. Nigeria is one of them. Out of every 17 persons in the world, one person must have had contact with drug abuse, illicit drug. But in Nigeria, the ratio is 8-1. And it's getting worse by the day. Now, imagine what poverty has done to us. Imagine what economic situation has brought about. Imagine what conflicts have brought about. Imagine what displacement, people displaced from their homes, has brought about when it comes to drug abuse. Imagine what crimes that has escalated, expanded, has brought about. Imagine the lack of care now existing in our universities and secondary schools and primary schools. And I'll tell you, we're not even just talking about university drug situations and all that. It has gotten down to primary school. And it's so pathetic that the government, the society, parents, you and I are not doing enough. And we're playing lip service to the issue of drugs. We just say no to drug abuse. But that's not what the government should be doing. Government should address it the way they address Ebola. It's an epidemic. It's expanding to a level that is beyond you and I when it gets to a certain point. I think that's how far I can go on that. So
okay, all right. Because is it when we are looking at epidemics such as Ebola, because from your statistics, it seems like the use of drugs seems to be much more dangerous than the epidemic of Ebola. But do you think that Nigeria would have that willpower to actually curtail this menace of drug abuse? Because a lot goes into treating drug abuse. There has to be rehabilitation, trying to convince this person that this is not what you're supposed to do. And I think convincing someone to drop something they enjoy could be way more difficult than curing a disease that this person wants to get better. But how do they manage situations where the person in question doesn't necessarily want to get better because they feel like they are living the best aspect of their life at that moment?
Well, to start with, the best solution is to catch them before they get in there. Preemptive. And that's what Minds is doing. Minds is split in two places, in two ways. We have preemptive, preventive, which is one side of the coin. And then the other one is curative. That is those that are already in it. And these are the ones that would need rehabilitation. They need revamping. They need reintegration into the system. They need reorientation. Those are the ones we need institutions like medical facilities and all that. But the core of our function is in reaching out to those that have not tried it to not try it at all. And that is why we think the government is not doing enough. In fact, the people are not doing enough too, because it's a collective responsibility. Now, I tell you, you asked the question, would Nigeria have the capacity to contain the issue? No country could have the capacity to. No country, I tell you, it's not even a Nigerian thing. So let's not just even think it's our peculiar problem. But the thing is, all hands has to be on deck. Conscious effort has to be done. Awareness, being aware. There are countries that have completely outlawed anything that has to do with drugs. If you come to their country with the drug, you go to their airport, you see written, drug traffickers would be killed. They don't, summarily, they just finish with that issue. They don't discuss it. One or two countries are already doing it, and some more countries are doing it. It's having that consciousness that this is a problem. that this is something that we need to address and have that willpower. It does not rely on one person. It does not rely on one government. It does not rely on one institution. All the institutions, all the caregivers, everyone has to be aware. Parents need to know. And we need to stop telling people, don't say no to drug abuse. We should start teaching them how to say no to drug abuse. How? It involves the parents. It involves the school teacher. It involves the students themselves. And we start awareness. We must give these people the opportunity to make this choice themselves. You see, what Minds does is that we bring the children, we show them the good life, show them the life that drug has fueled, and then ask them, which one would you rather have? Paint the picture and lead them through the streets of drug darkness. Lead them through the streets of working hard and positioning yourself and focusing on being a human being. And then what choice do you have? And then some parents don't even realize that when you do this work at home, you're saving yourself future challenges, because you may be lucky your son or your daughter may have the opportunity to have access to treatment. But if your grandchild was to get involved, your grandchild may not be so lucky. Because these facilities are depleting as our population is increasing. And the population of users, as they are increasing, our challenges are also increasing. So facilities where you're going to take care of those that are already involved, the victims, is shrinking relative to the population of the entrants, new entrants and old users, and those that are already terribly messed up by the drugs. So you see, it's something that we need to, first of all, have that consciousness, have that willpower, have that determination to work against it, to fight against this thing. And it's not going to be left to NDLEA alone. So when NDLEA is coming up with this kind of policy, I think that what they need to do predominantly would be to consider going to the root of this thing. It's like shooting fire extinguisher on the flame and not on the source of the fire. And that's what we've been doing all along. And I think we need to change that before it's too late.
Thank you, Warren. So if we are to look at the sociological aspects, they say family is a primary agent of change. So we know that part of this initiative is also for couples who are about to get married. They would also have to test them for drug addiction or drug use and all that. Would you say that perhaps the federal government should also extend it to for families who want to have children? Because it seems a lot of people, or a large percentage of people who abuse drugs, pick up that habit from what they see their parents or guardians do. So do you think that maybe they extend it to people who are trying to raise children to them? Perhaps we might have a reduction in the rate of drug abuse in the future.
Yes. Yes. But like I said, all hands has to be on deck. All system must be go. We must inculcate everything. You see, when we talked about COVID-19, when they said everybody should go home and sit in the house, everybody went home and sat in the house. Even the caregivers, the nurses and all those, they were also very sensitive. When they said everybody should wear nose masks, it's because we had that consciousness, we had that willpower, we had that need, we had that determination to get this thing out of our system, so that our country will not deplete the way, or tank the way other countries, because when COVID was on, there were countries that were having reports of people dying anyhow, okay? And we were forced to do something. But if we look at drug abuse from that same perspective, from that same prism of view, you will discover that we should do even more. So when you address couples, I think some things, some policies, some encourage, we should get our cultural values to inculcate the implication of drug abuse in the family. Because for whatever it is worth, majority of the domestic violence coming from that cannot be explained away for no justifiable reason have something to do with drugs. When the man is high or when the woman is high, the faculty does not work as normal. The body composition does not work as normal. The mental constitution does not function properly. And at some point, they will tell you, you can't blame the man or you can't blame the woman because it was under the influence. Why wouldn't you blame the person? So when we begin to realize the implications of certain lifestyles and we make them part of our values, we begin to solve the problem. It's something that we must have willfully decide to do.
Yeah, that is a very good point. Something we have to willfully decide to do ourselves. But I have to ask, do you think that poverty in a way too might be contributing to the prevalence of drug abuse among Nigerians today?
Tremendously, without a doubt. If we're looking at 45% usage on a normal economic situation, the likelihood of those that will start taking up drugs because they had made more money will not the percentage, the ratio of people that will go into drug abuse as a result of having made more money or having become richer or having moved out of poverty is less than the people that would go into drug abuse as a way of escape, temporary escape. The population of those that are likely to start using drugs as a result of their depressed situation are higher or is higher. So you see, the propensity to do drugs or to become a victim of drug abuse has a lot to do with economic situation of the individual, of the society rather. So you find out that some people would rather take a sachet of their usual, the sachet of shekpe, the one they call shekpe, and because it will sustain it will block their mental feeling of hunger. They would rather have something that will cost them 200 naira or 100 naira than to go look for where to get 1,500 naira to feed. And when they have that, the 100 naira stuff, they are on a different plane because one, they are even taking it on an empty stomach. So the effect is usually very high, higher than if you had solid food in your system and you had your juice. And then again, we need to also classify what drugs are. Drugs have classifications. So apart from the fact that we have medicinal drugs, which are prescription drugs and all that, we have illicit drugs, the ones that are outlawed drugs, harmful drugs, hard drugs, what we call so those ones are the ones we're even talking about here. Now, apart from the hard drugs, we have social drugs. There are drugs that are acceptable. Beer is drug. Cigarette is drug. Your coffee is drug. You may not know this, but so many people don't know. And any substance that you're likely to get addicted to, that could create some compulsion for you to consume it, even when you're not ordinarily ready for it. When you don't have the money for it, you go look for money to buy it. Some of them these are drugs.
Okay, well, because we are fast running out of time, I also asked this final question because you mentioned that one of the things that mind does is paint a picture of what would happen to you, what your future might be if you use drugs and you don't use drugs. But one of the funny things about Nigerians is they always know someone who does something, but then at the end of the day, they are successful. If you tell an average Nigerian that smoking is bad for you, alcohol is bad for you, they have read a list of like 5-10 people that they know who drank every day of their life and they lived to 100, they lived to 150, and they lived a peaceful life. The same thing too about some people who might be drug users, but then they are respected people in the society. They are very rich people. So how do we make people realize that, okay, using drugs is bad for you, despite the fact that some people are using it and they have this seemingly successful aura all around them?
What we try to tell our young ones, the children and the youth, is that you're a unique person. And you came into this world alone. And you're going to leave this world alone. And what happens between the time you came and the time you left is strictly your business and no other person's business. So you choose to be like another person. You have already sold yourself out. In other words, you removed yourself from the equation. That's number one. And when you look at it from that perspective, they begin to look at you, they say, yeah, I think this makes some bit of sense. It depends on the thing you're presenting them with. And that is why we say, don't just tell them, say no to drugs. Teach them how to say no to drugs. Because number one, you are an individual. You owe yourself a whole lot. You owe your family so much. You owe your society so much. You owe the country. You owe God if you're a Christian. You owe whatever you worship something. Would you want to be marked a failure? That's the choice. So, persuasion is important, but you also need to be trained to know how to tell people to go to hell and they will look forward to it.
Definitely. Thank you so much. It has really been enlightening. Thank you so much for joining us today on Firecrackers. And that's Alpha Umiano, the African Regional Director of Minds the Mass Initiative for Non-Illicit Drug Society. Thank you so much for joining us today on Firecrackers.
The pleasure has been mine.